This video is going to go over the slides for alternative patterns of heredity. One of the different patterns of heredity that we see is incomplete dominance. We're used to complete dominance, where if you have a dominant and a recessive, the recessive is covered by the dominant and could be seen after a generation when you cross two homozygous individuals. When you do incomplete dominance and you're crossing homozygous individuals, you usually get an intermediate. In this case, we have two alleles that are going to be shown. We have big R, and they show little r, and what you get are intermediates that are all pink. So in this case, we're looking at a phenotype of pink is intermediate between red and white. Now, in this homozygous red versus homozygous white cross, you get all pink kids. And if you cross two of the pinks together, you would then probably see a generation where you have some red, some white, but mostly all pink again, like we saw in the Snapdragon example. Unlike incomplete dominance, where you end up with an equal blending of those alleles, sort of like mixing pigments together and getting a variety of intermediate shade, another way that we can look at genetics is codominance. And with codominance, we end up with a situation where we end up with a mixture of traits throughout. So the phenotype is a checkered look, or it could be salt and pepper. We see this in the flower, we see that in the chicken picture here, but both alleles are expressed at the same time. Very different than what we saw in incomplete dominance, where it was a solid color, like a mixing of the pigments, like if you had two things of paint. Codominance, you see expressed both of the traits that were inherited. Another pattern that we see is something called multiple alleles, where you have more than two versions of a single gene. We're very used to, at this point, having dominant and recessive. We saw two alleles in incomplete dominance and two alleles in codominance, but now we can add another layer, because what we know about these alleles is that they come from DNA, and DNA has all these various proteins that can be made from the code, and what makes one person different from another is a difference in the code. Well, this makes sense that we have multiple alleles, because we have all these different mutations that would provide us with all kinds of variations. So rather than just dominant recessive, or one or the other, we could have a multitude of different alleles. You see these pictures of the bunny rabbits, right? They show us how we could have different alleles being expressed. So we try to use different symbols to show that there are more than two possible versions of a gene. We use a variety such as showing capitals for dominant, and we show superscripts to show the various types of alleles that might be also inherited. Now, this is what we see in human blood typing. So with human blood types, you know we can have A blood, B blood, AB blood, and O. Right? So in order to get an A type blood, you have to have at least one of the I superscript A's. Right? You can see that in the upper corner here. Right? Now you can have AB blood if you got an I, A from one parent and IB from another. And then if you have the recessive lowercase I and an IA, you have A blood as well. At the bottom of the chart here, you can see O blood. Right? O blood is when you have the two recessive alleles being inherited at the same time, right? Producing O blood. So not only is this showing multiple alleles because you have A, B, O, but you also have codominance in terms of people with AB blood. You have recessive, where you have complete dominance to get the O type, right? And you have these multiple alleles, obviously. Another pattern that we see is in line with sex determination. We know that in humans there are 22 autosomal chromosomes and two sex chromosomes. X chromosomes that are inherited is going to have the sex female. XY will be the X male because Y makes the guy. Now, because guys only get one X chromosome, means that there could be sex-linked traits. Meaning, if there is a trait, particularly on the X chromosome, and guys only have one of those chromosomes, a recessive trait found on the X chromosome is going to be more prevalent in males. Right? So, when we look at inheritance and the gene is on X chromosome, they're not going to necessarily have the ability to cross over, especially with meiosis process in males, because there's no other X that could possibly transfer genes. So we're looking at if a female is a carrier of a recessive trait, it could be very possible that it's passed on to her male offspring. Here we see fruit flies, right? There are a white-eyed male is being crossed with a red female, right? Produces all red individuals, right? Now, because males have a Y, if they get one recessive X, right? That recessive X holds onto that one allele that is for the white eyes, right? There's a higher chance of having a male with white eyes than a female, right? And that you sort of see that from a hybrid female carrier. We'll show that in the pedigree here, Punnett square, not pedigree, right? So we can see this in some other characteristics as well with humans. Color blindness in humans is a X-linked trait. So the ability to see certain colors, especially red, green, blue, right? On that spectrum of differentiating colors, it's that ability, the protein for that is found on the X chromosome. And females can carry it as well as males. So if a male has this particular recessive trait on his X chromosome, he cannot give his male son, right, the trait. But if the mom is a hybrid, she could be not colorblind herself, but because she has the recessive colorblindness on her other X chromosome, she could give colorblindness to her son. So sex-linked traits are pretty interesting. Another thought on human inheritance is polygenic inheritance. Poly meaning many. These are the different phenotypes that we see in people, the traits and characteristics, and we don't talk about them on Punnett squares and things because there are more than one gene to code for. Like eye color. You might say blue eyes are recessive, but eye color actually requires multiple proteins. So there's multiple genes. They could be all kinds. It could be multiple alleles. There could be codominance going on. So it's very hard to say that, one or the other is dominant or recessive. Same thing with hair color and skin tone and a variety of other traits in humans that require more than one gene to give you that particular phenotype or trait. Right? That's why we refer to a lot of them as polygenic.